Called an island city, Sviyazhsk seems to float over the Volga River with its beautiful cupolas soaring into the sky. Life is truly serene here. Visitors and locals alike can watch Volga's endless waters stream by forever, enjoying the tranquility of nature. It takes a horse and buggy 7 minutes to cross it. It takes a bird only 7 seconds to fly over. It is a small island of only a couple hundred people, but it has such a big and complicated past that one can use it to study the last 500 years of Russian history. Not once, but twice did the city define the fate of the Russian nation. Historians would tell you that if it wasn't for this small, unassuming island, the Russian Revolution might have taken a very different course. Today's peaceful looks are deceiving. Sviyazhsk has had one of the most tragic histories imaginable. Other Russian cities that fearlessly stood up to the enemy earned the titles of the City of Martial Glory. Sviyazhsk probably deserves the title of the City of Suffering for its quiet resilience not to the foreign invaders, but to Russia's own forces. The mass grave discovered along its monastery wall held remains of over 5,000 people, once imprisoned here in the Gulag camp. Some of Sviyazhsk's viciously killed residents were later canonized as saints. Two things played the most important part in Sviyazhsk's history. One was its proximity to Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan, long ago a Tatar kingdom and now a republic within the Russian Federation. The second one was the war, which Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible, only 20 years old at the time, waged against the Tatars in the 16th century. It was the early 1550s, and Ivan the Terrible had failed to take Kazan from the Tatars twice. At 400 miles east of Moscow, Kazan was simply too far to steadily supply the troops with provisions and ammunition necessary for the siege. The Tsar needed a military base closer to the Tatars' capital. As his troops retreated from Kazan, they marched by a steep round mountain towering over the confluence of two rivers, Volga and Svyaga. During spring floods, the mountain became an island, but other times it was accessible by a narrow path. Legend says Ivan the Terrible had a vision in which the Virgin Mary told him to build a fortress on the mountain. But how would one do it within the enemy's land and keep it secret? Ivan the Terrible decided to first build a fortress about 400 miles away from Kazan, further up the Volga, where deep, lush forests provided plenty of timber. Within months, a new wooden city rose, replete with towers, walls, churches, and even a royal mansion. Then, the builders dismantled the city, marked each log, tied them into rafts, loaded small parts on boats, and sailed off. About 400 miles down the river, several thousand craftsmen were already waiting. They captured the drifting timber and began to reassemble the city. The fortress, or Kremlin, was rebuilt within a month and became the largest in Russia at the time, beating even the Novgorod's and Moscow's Kremlins. The Tsar's entire army of 75,000 soldiers was involved in this unprecedented engineering feat. The grand finale was the Trinity Church, a wooden edifice built without a single nail and reassembled in one day by sunset. The architects of the time believed that using nails caused wood to rot, so buildings without nails lasted longer. The legend states that is where Ivan the Terrible prayed before leading his next attack on Kazan, supposedly right before this very altar. Ivan's plan proved successful. In a few more weeks, the Russian troops marched toward Kazan and took it by storm. Other local tribes that dwelled on the Volga's shores accepted Russian rule. The Tsar named his mountain fortress the Ivan City, but the name didn't take, and the place soon became known as Sviyazhsk. In its heyday, Sviyazhsk boasted over 4,000 residents, which was 2/3 of Kazan's population. As the first Christian city in the former Muslim Tatar state, Sviyazhsk was poised to become a Russian Orthodox stronghold. From a military fortress, the city grew into a religious center with many monasteries and places of worship, so beautiful and well run that they attracted pilgrims from all over Russia. Sviyazhsk was an island of calm and serenity and remained far from big cities, politics, and violence. It was famous for the magnificent chiming of its church bells that traveled far and wide over Volga's waters. For several centuries, Sviyazhsk enjoyed a fairly long stretch of peace, so long in fact that the wooden fortress eventually fell in disrepair. No one was fixing the aging walls and towers because the island didn't have to shield itself from anyone. But even if the walls had stayed, they would not have protected the city from the revolution. In the 20th century, Sviyazhsk once again played a major role in Russia's history. In 1918, the country was torn by the bitter war between the Red Army troops and the White Russians, the Royalists determined to take their country back from the Bolsheviks. Once again, Kazan became the bitter battleground, this time because it had Russia's gold reserves in its banks. Whoever had the gold would win the war, having secured funds to buy ammunition and food. The White Allies took Kazan. Despairing in Moscow, Vladimir Lenin sent his right-hand man, Lev Trotsky, to take Kazan and the gold back. As if learning from Ivan the Terrible, Trotsky mounted his offense from Sviyazhsk. Not much better than the dreaded monarch, Trotsky formed the Red Army platoons from the local citizens, shooting those who refused to fight. If a platoon failed at a mission, Trotsky shot every 10th soldier in the group and sent them back to the battlefield. Although he took Kazan, the White Allies beat him to the gold, which he later had to chase across Siberia. Before he left Sviyazhsk, however, he ordered to shoot several priests and destroy several churches. One of the priests, Father Ambrosi, who was suspected in helping the White Allies, was tied to a horse and dragged to death. The Soviets continued to exterminate Sviyazhsk's religious and spiritual essence. Some of its temples were torn down. Others became jails. Over the years, the Soviets literally turned the once charming city into a societal dumpster. They installed political jails, juvenile colonies, orphanages for children with special needs, a gulag camp, and a psychiatric institution. In 1957, when the Soviets built a hydroelectric station on the Volga, the nearby lands flooded, cutting the city from the mainland entirely. Sviyazhsk became the island of the unwanted. Systematically destroyed, devastated, and decimated for nearly 100 years, Sviyazhsk finally saw its fortunes turn around in the 21st century, when the local authorities set off to restore its glory. The Church of Constantine and Yelena, originally erected on the riverbanks in the 17th century, was repaired. The Church of St. Nicholas, dating back to the 16th century, was rebuilt. The Cieri church, also dating back to the same time, joined the ranks of the restored. The Dormition of the Theotokos Monastery opened its doors. So did the island's arguably most beautiful temple, built in the 19th century and presciently named Church of the Lady of Joy of Those Who Sorrow, as if prophesizing a happy ending to all sufferers. Brutally killed Father Ambrosi was canonized as a saint. Miraculously, the wooden Trinity Church survived till modern days, nearly intact, somehow avoiding the Soviets' demolition. The ancient architects proved right. Whether it was an absence of nails or sheer luck, the wooden temple lasted for over 400 years and is open for services. Like a phoenix, Sviyazhsk rebuilt itself from a century worth of rubble, welcoming the pilgrims and the tourists year-round. In summer months, boats sail here from Kazan. In winter, cars and buses drive across the frozen Volga. But no matter which way you go, Sviyazhsk's cupolas can be seen from far away, and its bells chiming once again travels far and wide over the water.